Hey everybody, what's going on? Kyle here, and I'm the Geekin Dad, and we are back with another episode of the podcast. In today's podcast, I'm interviewing a dad who also happens to have his own podcast, and his name's Tom Tate, and the name of that podcast is the Powertime Podcast. In the Powertime Podcast, Tom is sitting and going through the nostalgia of reading every issue of Nintendo's Powertime Magazine, and he kind of goes through and walks through game of the issue and what's going on in the issues from cover to cover, literally. And he just talks about his experiences. He does a fantastic job of finding really cool music to go with each podcast episode and with each game from that episode, and does a fantastic job with it. And with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, he is literally about 6 months ahead of me in terms of parenting experience. We have a great conversation talking about things like what it looks like when our toddlers get addicted to technology. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this long-ranging conversation with Tom Tate of the Powertime Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Geekin Dad Podcast. I know it's been a little bit, but I am back, and today I've got a very cool guest. I've got Tom Tate. I was introduced to Tom through the Digital Dads Facebook group, and he happens to have his own podcast. He happens to have his own kids. The Powertime Podcast and 2 kids. Tom, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Thanks so much. I apologize for the delay. I was sick a little bit, and you know what it's like having 2 kids, one of which is sick and getting sick yourself. So, thanks for putting up with me, kind of pushing back the recording a little bit, but I'm excited to be here. Totally.
Yeah. So, okay. Now we don't necessarily know each other that well, so I'll go ahead and acclimate you a little bit. So I've got 2 kids. I've got a 2.5-year-old and a now 4-month-old. Literally, he turned 4 today.
Awesome.
And while your 2 kids are sleeping, my 2 kids are, one is in the rock and play outside the shower. The other one is in the shower along with Mama. So while your kids are, while you may have to go run to aid a frantic, frightened, in the middle of a wake up child, I might have to go run and help a naked, wet child. I don't know. We will see.
It's okay though. That is the life we chose. It's the life of a dad, and I can accept it for sure.
Absolutely. And so how old are your 2 kids?
So my son is 3. He turned 3 in August. And my daughter just turned 1 a couple weeks ago. Oh,
so we're like, for all intents and purposes, in the same ballpark.
That's
awesome.
We're totally close.
That's great.
So you're 4 months into having 2. How have you enjoyed it so far? What's life been like on your end?
It's been frantic. I still haven't adjusted, honestly. And it's funny because we were home with him for not even a week, and my wife was already talking about a 3rd, and I'm just like, whoa. Calm yourself down now. I can't even think about it. I'm having a hard enough time keeping up with 2 and everything, like the change in schedules, and then the rebalancing of work, life, like side work and family and everything. And I'm just like, whoa, calm down. And I'm still at that point where I'm just like, whoa. Let me get comfortable with 2 first. Whereas before, with my first one, a couple months in, I was like, okay, I can do this again.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. We had the same conversations with our first heading into the second, and for whatever reason, having 2, and we're, like I said, 12 months into it, I still feel like I haven't found my footing and really managed to kind of reshuffle the deck and find that balance. Not that everything is kind of off kilter, everything's fine, but it's just, I can't even fathom having a 3rd child right now. I don't know how people do twins. I see people end up with twins and triplets, and God bless them, because it's challenging to have 2 kids. I try not to complain too much because my dad was actually one of 9. Oh
wow.
Yeah. So I have a history of, hearing stories about how things were growing up for him. They lived in a 3-bedroom house with 9 kids, and they made it work. So whenever I start to complain, even the least, my dad and of course his side of the family is the first to kind of put me in my place and just remind me, like we live in a townhouse. It's a modest townhouse by all means, and whenever we complain that we don't have enough space, I'm quick to be reminded that he grew up with 9 kids in a very, very small kind of row home in Northeast Philadelphia.
So you talked about how you're still trying to find the balance of everything, which is my number one struggle, and I'm sure a lot of other people's as well. How are you finding the balance now that you've also thrown in on top of everything else, the Powertime Podcast?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't think that I found it, and I'm quite a fool in that I continue to add on additional side projects and side work and just other things to occupy my time. So while I should be kind of taking the minimalist route and removing things that are taking up a ton of my time, I continue to find ways to just continue to add stuff. With the Powertime Podcast, it's interesting because I had extra time on my hands and I was looking for ways to be productive with it. I love video games, as you can probably imagine, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about what the show's about. But I wanted to find a way to kind of indulge myself in video games without just sitting in front of the TV playing video games. So the Powertime Podcast was an opportunity for me to explore Nintendo specifically and really play a bunch of old games, talk about a bunch of old games, but also create something in the process and really make an adequate use of my time. Around the same time, though, I received an offer to teach a college course. It's just a 3-hour course, or one night, 3-hour class a week. And on paper, that sounded really doable. But it is 45 minutes to an hour away from where I live and from where I work. But the opportunity was too great to pass up. So I said yes, but I've already committed to the podcast. So I added these two major time consuming things to my life. And that was late August. So it's October now. I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to find that balance.
So you sound a little bit like me in that you don't necessarily like to be too idle with your time.
Yep.
And so you end up just filling it with these side projects. That's cool that you're doing both, though. You're finding a way to make gaming a little bit more meaningful and finding a way to be like almost like when listening to the podcast, it's almost like a look back on what journalism was for games and kind of like a commentary on that. And then also like a commentary on journalism for games today, because the way you go through it, you take the approach of your memory and your experiences with it, and then what you're being presented with as well. And so it's really neat how you're kind of playing the games, which is it's fun to be able to go back and play the old classics, but then also the way you're combining the and I don't know if you intended to be like a journalistic aspect of it, but the way you're pulling it all together is really, really nice. And the fact that you're teaching on top of that all, man, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So I guess for all the listeners out there, the Powertime Podcast, it's basically an exploration of Nintendo Power. So you may remember Nintendo Power, which was the quintessential Nintendo magazine publication back in the day. It was first released in 1988. And I'm literally going through each issue. So each episode of the podcast corresponds to an issue, and I'm doing it chronologically. So we're in the kind of early days of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I'm really excited to move closer to Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. But yeah, as I go through and as I start to look at how they covered the featured games, I am doing a lot of research to see what has been covered today. From kind of, there's a lot of actual video game historians that I didn't really know existed until I got into this. And there's a lot of really awesome retrospective pieces out there, a lot of research that people are doing. And as you start to dig through and uncover a lot of fun facts about these games, it almost became too fun for me to not share it on the podcast. So then it ended up kind of taking on this journalistic slant, which has been fun, and it has been pretty well received. People have been enjoying that so far. I also have a lot of fact checkers, so if I ever say something presented as fact, and I have a lot of people who are quick to correct me if I'm wrong.
As we do on the internet, right?
Yep, it's great.
So you said your oldest is 3, which means we're getting like danger close to like really being able to introduce them to video games. How much older do you think before you like really sit down with them and like, okay, son, here's Mario Brothers?
It's going to be a bit. So I already have introduced him to a few video games, and the result hasn't been desirable, specifically from my wife. So he's at an age right now where if you put a controller in his hands, he will know what to do with it, especially if it's a simple game. If it's like an old 16-bit or 8-bit game, he'll know what to do. He'll know how to play, and he'll run, jump, probably get hit and die a bunch of times. But it's impossible when you put a controller in his hands to take it out of his hands. So he is so fixated on video games when you expose him to it that it just feels like it's a little too young for him to get that attached to something. We're kind of a no tablet family, so we really try to keep him away from cell phones and tablets and things like that. Occasionally he'll watch some cartoons on the iPad, but it's not really interactive. It's more or less just watching a few cartoons that he would otherwise watch on TV. But yeah, when I introduced him to video games for the first time, he was just fascinated, but I couldn't get him away from the screen, and that felt a little odd to me. Certainly I was the same way when I was a kid, but not at that age. Definitely. I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old when I first really got glued to the television with the Nintendo Entertainment System specifically. I built a little arcade cabinet, just like a little tabletop one with a Raspberry Pi, and I loaded up with a bunch of games, and I was able to show him some games from franchises that he's familiar with. So I showed him, a couple of the Mickey games from the Super Nintendo era and Genesis era, and then just a few Nintendo games that I just knew would be easy for him to pick up and play, like Paperboy, Super Mario Brothers. And for the few times that we played, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a lot of fun, and he enjoyed it, but I think he enjoyed it a little bit too much.
So on the whole subject of effectively screen time, so you limit it to like a lot, it sounds like. And is that just because what's the theory behind that, I guess, would be the better way to ask it?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a specific theory behind why we limit it so much. I think it more or less just comes from us wanting to develop a sense of being super present when we're all together. So if I'm on my laptop or my phone or my iPad, my wife is quick to call me out on it when we're in front of the kids. And likewise, I'll call her out on it too. So I think it's just a conscious effort for all of us, really, just to try to be focused and present, because it's so easy, I think, just to get lost in that stuff.
It is.
And you know what? When I'll be honest, because when the kids go to bed, it's not uncommon for my wife to be on one side of the couch on her phone and her laptop, and me to be on the other side of the couch on my phone and my laptop. So, we have to kind of call each other out when we're around each other too. But I just think it's so easy just to get sucked into all that. And I'm not opposed to him getting cell phones and tablets and all that stuff, but he's going to get them eventually. And right now I really just want him to be a kid, so yeah. Playing with a lot of hands-on toys and Legos and puzzles and all the things that I remember growing up with. And then also reading a lot of books. So we definitely advocate for a lot of reading. And it keeps him occupied. We do let him watch a lot of TV. So I won't say that we're like these perfect.
So he watches a lot of TV, but y'all do it like as a family unit.
Yeah. Like we don't typically just park him in front of the TV and let him occupy himself that way. We actually try to advocate like having the TV on in the background, but really having him do other things too. So like he'll be
still playing.
Yeah, like he has a little castle set, so he'll be playing with his knights in his castle, and Mickey Mouse Clubhouse will be on in the background, and occasionally he'll stop playing and watch a segment, but then when he loses his attention on that, he'll go back to playing. So Yeah, I think it's not really grounded in anything. It's more or less just a conscious effort for us to really just make sure that he's not getting too sucked in. Because, like I said, when we put him in front of the Raspberry Pi arcade cabinet, it was impossible. I mean, he really threw a fit. He was like in a matter of 15, 20 minutes, he was addicted to video games, and that was his first exposure to it.
Wow.
So I know how easy it is to get sucked into the flashing lights and all that stuff.
While I grew up playing like on the Super NES and the N64, and then eventually Xbox, I also grew up playing on the PC with my dad. And I grew up playing like Doom and Wolfenstein when I was 5 or 6 years old. And so the PC gamer side of me is what kind of carried on to present day as opposed to like the console gamer.
Sure.
And I think it's because I can easily play a game on the PC without interrupting anybody in the family versus console. We only have one TV in the house.
Yep.
So I would be interrupting everybody. And so it's hard. Because I'm a PC gamer today, I haven't really taken the time to introduce my daughter to anything just because it's not what I play right now. And it's where as soon as that NES Classic comes out, I'm going to get one, and I'm going to be sure to pick up a second controller so I can try to play with her because I think it would be a lot of fun. But I think that knowing how quickly your son jumped onto it, I'm interested to see how quickly my daughter jumps on, because in the same way that he got super addicted to the arcade system pretty quickly, if we let my daughter on, because she has her own Kindle and she uses it to watch like all the shows except for Caillou. So Daniel Tiger, we're good with. What else is on? Daniel Tiger is kind of the main one on the Kindle, actually, now that I think about it. But she'll watch her shows on the Kindle, and I've noticed in a similar fashion, and my wife has too, and so we try to like balance it as best we can. But if we do let her watch too much, we get a similar thing. So knowing that she's this way now, and then hearing your experience, I'm really interested to see what happens when I do ultimately introduce her to Mario Brothers or something like that. Like, it's really got me a little worried now, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about it, but it definitely was something that I wasn't expecting, because we will play with other things, and then when it's time to stop playing, like, it's typically not a problem, but with video games, it's an issue. We visited my dad. I have a younger brother who's in high school, and him and his friends were playing Super Smash Brothers, and I was outside at the time with the rest of my family, and he was in there with the big kids watching them play Super Smash Brothers. And I was a little wary about that just because of all the, the fighting and things like behaviors I don't want him to go repeat when he's at the playground.
Or words you may not want him repeating.
Yeah, or words that I don't want him to repeat, right? But they gave him a controller that wasn't plugged in to just give him the feeling that he was a part of the gang and just playing. And that was months ago, and he still talks about it. Just the idea that like he'll still bring up like, hey, Dad, remember when I was playing Mega Man with Uncle Dan and I was playing Super Smash Brothers? And he'll just talk about it. And it's just like, I just think like
awesome.
But I just think he's probably a lot like me in the sense that like video gaming is just a part of his DNA. And I think he's just gonna have that fascination towards it, and I'm okay with that. I just want to certainly be in somewhat control right now. I will say this: if you're trying to introduce your daughter to just some father-daughter PC bonding time, we have spent some time on the Daniel Tiger website. The official Daniel Tiger website has some really cool kid-friendly interactive games that I've done it with my son Luca, and he loves it.
Neat.
It's really cool. There's actually one, we're geeking out over Daniel Tiger now, but there's actually one where Daniel helps his sister Margaret take a bath. So it's Daniel's mom and Margaret, and you can kind of click on different things in this hub to interact with it. And we introduced that to him before our daughter was born to try to get him acclimated with the idea that he was going to be a big brother and he was going to have a sister and there was going to be a baby in the house. And I think it helped a lot. So there's a lot of good educational, kid-friendly PC stuff that we stumbled upon. And we'll only do it like once or twice, every 2-3 weeks. But just 15-20 minutes on the PC or on our laptops. It's just a fun little activity that we do. We explore some of those kind of franchise sites.
Yeah, I'm sure she would actually love that because, I can't tell you how many times I get up to leave to go help with something or it's time to start getting ready for bed and she'll climb up in my chair. And, of course, it's one of those big fancy chairs, so it like is towering over her. And she's like, roll me up so I can work too, Daddy, because 90% of the time nowadays when I'm in the office, I'm working on something. I'm not playing nearly as much as I used to. But so now she's just... I'm working too, Mommy. I'm working too, Daddy. And so I think that I'll have to start looking for those things because it just doesn't cross my mind right now.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I'm glad you bring that up because as soon as you find one, I'm sure I'll find 100 more that are going to be just as great. And if I find something Frozen related, I know I'll be golden.
Yep.
So what's some of the more surprising things that you've learned through the 3 years so far that you have of parenting? And I know 3 years isn't much, but at the same time, it's still plenty of time to be surprised.
It's a long time in parenting years, I think. Just every day is kind of its own adventure, I've found. I think one of the most surprising, well, maybe this isn't even surprising, but one of the most interesting things that I've learned is how much I'm like my dad. Especially when it comes to choices that I make as a parent. I've always kind of been a little like my dad, and I've always looked up to him. He's been kind of a role model for me. He was the best man at my wedding. But it wasn't until I had a kid and I started kind of taking on and embodying a lot of the parenting philosophies that I didn't even realize I grew up under the influence of, but I did. And I just started finding myself just slowly morphing into just full on dad mode. And in doing so, just really resembled a lot of the kind of dadisms that my dad had. So that was pretty surprising, I guess, pretty interesting for me. And
that's awesome.
And the other thing I learned is that, there's no manual, there's no handbook.
No.
You just, every kid's different. That's the other thing too, is you can't fall into the trap of comparing one kid with the other or your kids with another couple's kids. It's just not even worth it. You really just need to dial into your own children and just tap into your instincts and trust the people around you and just do what's right for your kids. But yeah, I mean, that's been probably the two biggest learnings for me. I'm curious, what have you learned in your years?
That I have to figure out and stick with my routines. If I can keep my routines in line with the rest of the family, then I'm A-okay. As an example, right now the routine is I'm up and I leave for work. I come home from work anywhere from 6 to 6:30 on most days. We have dinner, we hang out, and we play if there's time after dinner. And then come 7:30, it's time to start the bedtime routine. So shower, bath, get cleaned up, get dressed for the night, let mama shower and get dressed for the night, get diapers finally changed so that we can get everybody tucked in between 8:30 and 9. And then that's when I come into the office and I continue working. But if I throw a kink in that, say, or if there's any kink thrown in that routine, either I get home late, which puts us eating late, which puts us going to bedtime late, which puts us like any kinks in the routines really just kind of throw things askew. And that's been the biggest thing that's really surprised me the most, is because when they're babies, routine's nice, but for the most part, they're going to sleep when they want to sleep. They're going to eat when they want to eat, and you'll know when it's time to change a diaper. And there's not a whole lot that goes to it. At least not with Georgia, there wasn't, my oldest daughter.
Sure.
And with my son, it's pretty much the same thing. He eats when he wants to eat. He sleeps really, really great when it's time to sleep, and when it's time to change his diaper, because you can feel it every time.
Yeah, yep.
When it happens. But now that my daughter's 2.5, the routine stuff is really starting to come into a larger play, because it's interesting. Up until about 1.5, my daughter could have cared less if I was in the picture or not.
Sure.
And I'm sure you could probably attest to this as well. And it seems like other parents that I've talked to are kind of in the same boat, that like, especially dads, like up to like a year and a half, it's like dad's there. That's great and all, but the kid's all about mama at that point.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
And then at some point, something just switched with her to where she's all about me now. And so if I don't have that quality time with her, which again, if the schedule gets jacked up and interferes with that quality time with her, she is a different animal.
Yes.
And she is just the definition of terrible twos at that point, And so I think that's really been the biggest surprise for me so far in my all 2.5 years of parenting, is that the older she's become, the more important the rituals of the day and the routine have become, which I guess makes sense considering we are habitual creatures, but it just surprised me how much of an impact it makes. And with her, it's like such a instant impact. If I change my routine personally for a week, it takes an entire week for it to really impact me, because, as adults, we can just adjust so well. Sure. And we can manage and cope and deal with those changes in what is the routine, versus someone so little who's only had a short amount of time with any kind of routine, and then all of a sudden you go and change it up, and just like the backlash that can come, it's just like, wow, who are you, child?
Oh yeah.
And then you just have to like let them go. And last night we had a temper tantrum because of a break in routine, and it wasn't even a big break in routine. It was something like completely minor, but she just went off the handle, and 30 minutes later we finally got the teeth brushed.
Yeah, we see it all the time too. I mean, our kids are complete creatures of habit, and we've been really fortunate. My wife has been able to stay home with the kids up until this point, and in doing so, I think that only she has continued to keep them on a routine. So like naps are at the exact same time every day, lunches at the exact same time every day, and we only recently sent Luca, my son, to preschool. So he's going to preschool 2 days a week. And that was a big kink in his routine. So we had to, deal with that adjustment as well. But anytime we travel, anytime we visit family and we're out too late, it's true. I mean, it really, really changes the behavior. And then you have to readjust to it. But yeah, in terms of as dads trying to keep the routine down, I actually have never been a morning person, but I've been waking up earlier just so I can get side project stuff, personal stuff done, at least some of it done before anybody else gets up in the house. And I found that to be incredibly helpful, just to at least feel in control of my own day. So, I mean, not super early, like try to get out of bed at around like 5:30, but really just to get up and get out and get some things done, before anybody else wakes up in the house has been really, really helpful for me. Especially with taking on like the Powertime Podcast and a few other projects. So yeah, I mean, if anybody's listening and struggling with that, there's a couple of books about that too. I actually haven't read them, but there's a book called The Miracle Morning that I know is supposed to be
heard about it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be really popular. Just in terms of kind of helping you to establish that morning routine. But even if I've never been a morning person. My whole life I've been, up until the late hours of the evening and then sleeping in. But the adjustment and the transformation has really paid off. So, if any Geekin Dads out there are listening, I definitely recommend just trying to set the clock back even 45 minutes. It could really help out.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the fact that you're a late night person. Even in high school, this is how far it goes back. All the way, I remember vividly in high school being up until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore,
Mm-hmm.
crash, and then get up at the 5 seconds after the absolute last second, shower, get to school
Yep.
just in time. And then, the whole routine it would just continue the cycle. And I think a part of that was because I did sports in school and I did extracurricular activities, which kind of put a natural shift towards things happening later. And then, of course, in high school, I started working in restaurants, which, of course, if you start working in restaurants, you're not done until 10 or 11 at night anyways. And so that thus further pushed that shift towards the evening, nighttime productivity hours over the morning. And I have tried several times of resetting my clock, if you will, and I'll go for 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month. And then inevitably something comes up and it's like, well, I've got as an example, some of the interviews that I've had have been Pacific Standard Time, and I'm Central Standard Time. So that's 2 hours behind me. So if 7:30 is great for me, it may not be great for someone else who's having dinner with their family at 5:30, for example. And if they've got to get their kids down, it might not be until 8 o'clock, which means it's not until 10 o'clock, which means all of a sudden that whole attempt at, oh yeah, let's be in bed by 9 o'clock is gone. And so inevitably it always comes back to this, help get the family down. And almost always right now, by 9:15, I'm in here. Everybody's asleep, and it's not exactly the same as getting up early in the morning, but the quiet hours, I still do get them, which is helpful.
Yeah.
So far.
And you know what? People are wired differently. Some people are naturally wired to be more creative, more productive in the later hours of the day. And I think that is not something you should fight. I definitely think anybody out there listening, find that hour of the day where, you're going to be able to focus and be productive and reserve it for yourself and the things that you need to get done. For me, it was just easier in the morning because, I found at the end of the day, for me to be productive, it wasn't possible because I exerted so much energy throughout the day.
Yeah.
Like my job and then the evening routine with the kids. Just at the end of the day, I'd rather watch Game of Thrones and sit and binge on TV. Just do something a little bit more mindless than sit down and record a podcast. Sometimes I find myself recording a podcast after a long day, and I feel like the quality isn't as good as if I were to have done it in the morning, cup of coffee, energized, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, like you said, things happen, interviews late at night. Like I'll tell you, the past couple of weeks, I've been so sick that all I care about is getting the max amount of sleep, that I haven't been waking up early, or staying up late. It's really just been how much sleep can I get this evening, just to get my health back to where it was. So, but yeah, it's tough. The routine is a challenge, not just for the kids, but for myself and for my relationship with my wife too. Making sure that the rituals, that the rituals of your marriage are staying true as well. Just making sure that we're having occasional dinners together and getting out and seeing friends with a babysitter. So that we can just make sure that all that stuff is being maintained too.
Oh yeah, it's an important part as well. It's something that during the week, it's not necessarily once Friday hits, things kind of tone down because I can casually get up on a Saturday morning and get a little bit of work done in the morning time while everybody's kind of still waking up. And of course, my daughter, she's like, when she's up, she's like, I want to go outside, and I'm like, I need more coffee. But
it's
totally. I can. Weekends are usually definitely more family focused and oriented as opposed to the week. It's more, I'm here for dinner and that time. And then it's time for the routine and it's time to go to bed so that I can go to work. But it's an interesting thing finding the balance, because I'd rather wake up and have my coffee and have my just completely mindless entertainment in the morning to kind of ease into the day, as opposed to ending the day on that. And I'd rather go to bed. Just I can't, if I go to bed and I am just not exhausted to the point of just like passing out, I have the hardest time going to sleep.
Yep.
And so I've literally gotten to a point to where I just have to work myself to sleep. And so, and of course, sometimes it's not work. Sometimes it's, I just have to stay up and play games until I literally can't go to sleep anymore if I'm kind of caught up with all the side work. But it's interesting to hear that it's always just intriguing, like the differences in the routines that other parents find when, I'm assuming you still have a day job as well, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, my day job is pretty taxing too. I mean, it's definitely a lot of work. I'm on a marketing team for a software company. So,
okay, cool.
It's probably, I guess, about a 30-minute commute. And then I'm there for, 9 hours. There's an hour lunch in there, and then it's, another 30 minutes home. So pretty long days. And then just like you, you come home and it's already dinner time, and you want to maximize however much time you can get with the kids. And then it's kicking off the bedtime routine. But yeah, everyone has a different rhythm. I found that too in talking with other parents. You have to find what works best for your family. And as soon as you get comfortable with it, something always seems to happen, and then you have to readjust to something new anyways.
Boy, is that the truth. Speaking of something happening, and you touched on it earlier with your son going to pre-K, what are y'all gonna, I know he's in there now, and I'm sure I hope at this point he's loving it. But I'm wondering, what are y'all gonna do for school, like when it comes time for grade school? Y'all gonna do the public schools, or have y'all talked much about public versus private versus home? Or
we've talked a lot about it, but I don't think we've come to a conclusion yet. I was raised very Catholic. I'm still very Catholic, but I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school up until 8th grade, and then I went to a private Catholic high school. So for me, private is definitely something I want to encourage, but it's not like a hard and fast, enforcement for me. Like, we have to send our kids to a private school, and it has to be, the one I went to, or anything like that. And my wife grew up going to public school, and she prior to having kids, she was a public school teacher. So we come from both different worlds, public and private, and we see the merits of both. And it's tough to say. I'm very attracted to the prospect of homeschooling, especially because my wife does have a teaching background.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it. I'm a little concerned with making sure that our kids are developing socially if we go that route. And I know there's a lot of different options these days, meetup groups, and a lot of different ways to just make sure that your children are being exposed to other kids and other groups. But yeah, it could go either way at this point, I think.
Well, the good news is we still have a couple more years before we have to nail that decision down.
And honestly, finances are going to play a role, because private schools are not cheap these days.
No, they're not. They're not. It's something that, going back to earlier, what surprised me the most, the level at which I care about this conversation has surprised me a lot as well.
Yeah, totally.
And how early I've actually started to care. And so it's one of those things that, of course, in every region, there's pros and cons to everything. But then as a whole, the concepts of homeschool versus private school versus public school, and the pros and cons on a whole, it's something that I hadn't thought would be as big of a deal to me. But like I said, it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing that sits in the back of my mind.
Are you leaning in any specific direction?
No.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that like, and I've said this on the podcast before, but so I was public school through and through.
Sure.
My wife was public school up until about 8th grade. And then she switched to homeschool.
Okay.
But she didn't switch to homeschool where mom taught her. She switched to one of the homeschool organizations where you get to go, you go to a campus of some sort. In her case, it was at her church. And you have like classes in a small group setting, and it's still homeschool, but it's that cross between like a homeschool and a private school.
Sure.
I forget the name of what it was called before, but now it's called Logos. If you're familiar with that name. But so she went to that, and it's interesting because I think that the only thing that I have come to realize is that regardless of what system is selected, the biggest determining factor of our child's success is going to be how engaged and how involved and how active we are in the schooling process, be it as homeschool teachers, as PTO mom and dad, or as, volunteers for everything at school, just in how involved we can be with homework and making sure they're on top of that. And, all the things that go with being involved as a parent with a child in school. Like, I've come to realize that it doesn't seem to matter what system it is, but rather the level of involvement that the parent takes. And so from that perspective, I just don't know which one I want to go. And so I sit here and like I said, I'm glad that I've got some time still, but I do wish I had right now the finances to put my daughter in like a pre-K that goes 2 or 3 times a week so we can see how it goes. So we can start experimenting now with something that's less, I don't want to say impactful, because as soon as someone's teaching your child, it's impactful, but start early to figure out what's going to work best, basically. That's the best way to put it, I guess. And so it's kind of envious of the fact that you're able to do that right now. And then like my sister, she's got a son he turns 3 next Monday, I think. Is it next Monday? Yeah. Sunday or Monday, one of the two. He turns 3 next week, and he's in a pre-K too, and he loves it. He's got himself a little girlfriend already and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So it is. It really,
That's cute.
is.
Yeah.
But, and so it's just, I don't know yet, but I know the one thing that matters is the involvement of the parent. And so I guess the rest is just going to be a matter of finances, more than likely, above all else, dictating what ends up happening.
Yeah, I think we'll be in the same boat. And I absolutely agree. I think, you look at, and I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but you look at cyberbullying and you look at all these scary things as a parent, just letting your kids go off into, and that's in public school and private school, it's everywhere. Prescription drugs. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of scary stuff that as a parent, I just want to shield my kids from. But I think, like you said, it's all about the level of involvement. And if you as a parent have the strongest influence on your kids, I feel like that's the difference. That
Exactly.
really makes the difference, is that, at the end of the day, it's not your children's friends or their teachers. Like, the voice in the back of their head is the values and the things that you have instilled in them, because you've had the most influence and you've had the most involvement. And yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. And we talk about this all the time. Like, no matter what happens, I mean, I just think that, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our kids, are closest to us.
Yes.
And when they're not with us, they're still essentially, we're with them essentially.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. Perfect sense.
Cool.
All right, man. So one last plug. You've got PowertimePodcast.com. You got the Powertime Podcast. Where else can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. At TNRT is my kind of personal Twitter handle. Probably the best place to follow me. Unless you're an absolute gaming nerd, then you can follow me on my alternate Twitter handle, which is at Yo Powertime, YO Powertime. And just, Twitter's probably the best way to get in touch with me if you want to connect. I do also have another interesting side project that we didn't talk about at all. But I do want to plug this because I think it's applicable to moms and dads and people who are struggling with time management and balance, right? So we talked about a lot of these things. So in my previous life, I was a project manager. So I did a lot of time management studying and a lot of productivity work. So I have a weekly email newsletter that I send out once a week. It is called Weekly Coffee. And I write all about ways to work on creating positive habits and work on productivity habits and work on establishing routine. Today last Monday, the one that went out was all about controlling the limited amount of time that you have in a day. So if you want to check that out, it's at weekly.coffee. So it is a coffee.
Nice.
Yeah, it is a coffee domain. So weekly.coffee. If you want to check that out, it's just a free newsletter. It's something that I do once a week for fun. But yeah, I have a decent audience size for that and people seem to enjoy it. So if you're stuck in the hustle and bustle of things, it's a nice little weekly refresher just to help you pick up some new tricks and just try to better manage these busy lives that we find ourselves in.
Well, I will be sure to sign up for that here real quick as soon as we get off this phone.
Awesome.
So, Tom, thank you so much for your time, man. I know you've got sleeping kids that you're going to enjoy that a little bit of alone time with, I'm sure, catching up on. What are you going to catch up on tonight?
So tonight I'm going to be digging into the first issue of Nintendo Power in the 1990s. Nice. Issue number 10, which actually has Jack Nicholson on the cover from Batman. So pretty excited about that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All right, man. Well, you have a good night. Thanks again. And everybody else, thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Tom for joining me for this conversation. It was great to get into the weeds a little bit about schooling. It was great to hear about his other side project of weekly.coffee. I have signed up for it and I'm receiving those emails. And if you sign up for it too, let me know. And if you happen to be the one to win the free coffee, really and truly, you should just pass it on to me because I'm the one who brought that to you. So, thank you all very much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. You can find me on the socials at Geekin Dad. And until next time, geek on.